It is Monday, May 25th, and you're watching the Sick Podcast. Trust the process. The Eastern and Western Conference Finals are well underway. The Western Conference Finals might actually be coming to an end pretty soon. What a turn of events there. But we're going to talk about mostly the Eastern Conference Final between the Montreal Canadiens and the Carolina Hurricanes. The series is tied 1-1. The Habs have inflicted the Canes their first loss in these playoffs. Can they do it again 3 more times? We're going to break it down right here. We're also going to talk about the Memorial Cup tournament, which has been underway in Kelowna. A few games have been played. We get an idea, maybe a sense of who the real contenders are here. And, of course, we have some great mailbag questions in the queue. It's going to be a fun show as always, and it all starts right here, right now.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Trust the process. The sickest NHL prospect podcast with Snake and Shayne.
With the 5th overall selection in the 2024 NHL Draft, the Montreal Canadiens are proud to select Ivan Demidov.
It's gonna be sick.
All right, producer Shayne here, joined as always by my co-host Simon the Snake Boisvert. Snake, how are we doing today?
Doing great, and you, Shayne?
Excellent. It's crappy weather outside. Actually, this weekend has not been great for the Grand Prix. Yesterday was not the best, and today either. But listen, we're indoors. And the hockey game is indoors as well. Unfortunately for the watch party outside, might not be great, but hey, worth it. Worth it, in my opinion. Nonetheless, Snake, Game 3 tonight, as people are watching this on Monday. This is going to be a deciding one because the Habs have not been great at home. However, they have yet to lose 2 games in a row. So one of these narratives is going to die tonight. But Snake, so far through 2 games, let's get your thoughts on this series. And let's start with the positives. What have you liked the most from the Canadiens through 2 games?
Well, obviously the first game, it goes without saying that they played a very good game. They capitalized on the Hurricanes' mistakes in the first period. And Dobeš has been, as good as in the first 2 series. So that's pretty positive. And I would say the other positive is, although on Saturday, it seems like they were dominated, they still only lost 3-2 in overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, if you look at the stats, but just with the eye test confirms the stats. Yes, the Hurricanes, like we expected, they're pretty annoying with their forecheck. And they try lots of shots on goals.
Yeah.
But really, they don't get that many
high danger scoring opportunities.
Or scoring chances.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a great offensive team, I would say. It's a good offensive team, but it's not a great defensive team. So I would say that's the positive so far, that the Habs loss was still only 3-2, although, the Hurricanes played their style, and it worked.
That's it. One of the major positives for me has been the way that the Habs have defended so far through 2 games. I mean, like you mentioned, the Hurricanes' style is more of a shoot anything you can at the net and see what goes in. So maybe that's part of the reason why they haven't gotten many high danger scoring chances. But even then, when the Hurricanes are controlling the play in the offensive zone, very rarely do you see them get a scoring chance. Like sometimes they will, but mostly it's very minimal. And I credit that to the Habs defending. I think, the group of 6 defensemen, as well as the forwards, they've been engaged in the D zone. I've really appreciated the way they've defended, Snake.
Yeah. If you want to go with the negatives now.
I'm sure you have some negatives, yeah.
well, not that many, but one thing that I want to pinpoint is that Have you noticed that the of the three losses that the Habs had in overtime, that Doc and Bolduc were always on the ice, and Captain was with them on Saturday, and Martin Saint-Louis was asked a question, by Guillaume François, and then he was annoyed by the question, but really that's a pretty good question. I mean, you're in overtime. You have in the Stanley Cup Final Four, you have to shorten your bench. And at some point, what I've noticed, in all the years that I've followed sports, whether it be hockey, baseball, football, there are just so many players that you can really, really rely on. This is not a Tuesday night game in November at the Bell Center.
Yeah.
So you realize that, and you see it with coaches. They always play the same guys. I see it in junior hockey. As the season goes on, coaches play the top six, ad nauseum. And it's the same in the NHL. So, yeah, you want to give a break to your top three lines. You want to, you're going to take the chance of sending them, but now it's been 3 times. So maybe there's something about it. And in the first game, Rob Brandamore did not really take advantage of home ice in terms of matchups, but in the second game he did. Now it's going back to the Bell Center because Nick Suzuki's line, let's face it, when they faced Jordan Staal on Saturday, it was hard. It was also hard against Josh Norris against Buffalo, and it was even harder against Anthony Cirelli. Now Martin Saint-Louis has the last change for the next 2 games. 3 of the next 4 games, and he really has to take advantage of it because we saw it on Thursday. The Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky line is not dead. It's not
far from it.
No, they can still play hockey.
Yeah.
And although I have to say that Suzuki has been better than Caulfield and Slavkovsky, let's be honest, he brings more to the table than those 2 guys.
He's third in playoff scoring.
Exactly. Lots of power play points, but still, he's third in playoff scoring. But still, I think the numbers show that the Suzuki line at 5-on-5 in the playoffs was outscored 7-2 in the first 16 games. So they really have to take advantage of the matchups because if they get the same matchups as last Thursday, the Habs could score quite a few goals.
Exactly.
If they play against Aho, let's say, the Suzuki line against the Aho line, I think Suzuki's not. Yeah, it's much better.
Killed them. Yeah. Look, it's going to be up to Marty to decide that. But Snake, to your point now about that Kapanen line. I mean, I could understand the reasoning had that line been great in the first 60 minutes of that game, right? Had they had a really good game and they were feeling it. Yeah, you stay with the momentum, throw them out in overtime, see what they've got. Snake, they were horrible in that game.
Yeah. And that can
finish.
They had moments in the playoffs.
But we're talking about Doc and Bud. Yeah. I'm sorry, but Kapanen hasn't done anything.
Forget it.
Nothing. Look, okay. I don't like to pump our tires too much, okay? And I don't think I'm pumping our tires anyway. I'm just saying that for all the crap that Snake got, even I got, for warning people to maybe tone down the expectations with Kapanen. Look what we're talking. We know what we're talking about, okay? Like, come on. He's not playing tonight. Valeno's coming back in for good reason. Kapanen's just not ready, okay? Doesn't mean he's a bad player. Never said that. Never said he's shit, okay? He's just not ready. That's it.
I think what happens, Shayne, is that when I make predictions, I'd rather my predictions have a positive outcome. I'd rather say a guy will be a 40-goal scorer and he becomes a 40-goal scorer than say that a guy is not as good as people think and he ends up not being as good. To me, predicting negative stuff, I don't like doing it, but sometimes you have to do because, we had a scouting meeting yesterday for the QMJHL draft. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we have to cross out players from our list. So basically we have to come up with, the positives and the negatives. Yeah. And so that's my mentality when I analyze a player. And sometimes I feel that players are not going to be as good as some people think, or they're not going to make it. And I have to say it. Look, let's see next year what happens with Kapanen. I think he's more suited for a winger role. and perhaps a bottom six role, and we'll take it from there.
Exactly. But all we've ever said was temper expectations, right? Don't
Yeah.
let the goal total cloud your judgment and your perception. I'll leave it at that. Snake, further on the Habs now, something that came to mind after game one, and I'm not overly worried of that happening, but again, the show is called Trust the Process, so we have to analyze this potential outcome. The fact that the Habs have made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals and through 2 games are tied against the team that won the East, do you think that could potentially give a false sense of accomplishment throughout the organization, whether that be, the players, the coaching staff, the management, whatever it may be? Do you think they could be like, oh, we're here, like we're actually here, like we can win with this score? Or do you think they'll actually follow along with the process that was implemented by Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton?
I absolutely think they will, because they've been there for 4 years now.
Yeah.
4.5 years, I would say. And they have proven so far that they did nothing, absolutely nothing, to speed up the process with shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. And some might say, yeah, but they traded the 16th and the 17th pick for Dobson. That is correct. But Noah Dobson was only 25 years old, and then they signed him for 8 years. Yeah. So to me, a 25-year-old defenseman is as good as an 18-year-old drafted player in the middle of the first round that you don't know what's going to happen. So to me, that's not a shortcut. And so they've proven to me that I think they do see the flaws, or the flaws. I would say that the things to improve, and because in sports and in the NHL in general, the floor is littered with teams that made it to the Final Four only not to be seen again. But there are also teams that use the Final Four as a diving board towards greatness. So whether they win or lose, they've reached the Final Four with a very, very young team in the sense that the pillars are young.
That's it.
Yeah, because some teams, you look at certain teams that reach the Final Four, and most of their stars are just a few years away from fading. Mm-hmm. And the Habs, it's just the beginning. So I do think that they are still building. It's kind of a bonus that they've reached the Final Four this year. It's going to be an even bigger bonus if they reach the finals. But I have to tell you, even if they win the cup, which is not impossible.
Yeah.
Even if they win the cup, I would say that Hughes and Gordon will still do everything they can to maintain the greatness and not just be like, let's say, the St. Louis Blues of 2019. But I think you can't really compare the Blues and the Habs because it's not the
lightning in a bottle.
Roster, but it was a lightning in a bottle situation. I think even if they win, they'll realize they need a number 2 center if they want to win again and again and again.
Exactly.
And I think that is the goal. So I'm not concerned at all. I would have been concerned maybe with some other organizations or some other GMs. Like I remember in 2006, the Edmonton Oilers reached the Stanley Cup Finals, and they thought they were just one win away from the Stanley Cup because they lost in Game 7 against Carolina. And later, former GM Kevin Lowe, when they started rebuilding in the 2010s and they were like really horrible, they said, I think my biggest mistake was to think that Stanley Cup Finals in 2006 was basically like we had arrived.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think every analyst knew that they hadn't arrived. But I think the difference between the Oilers of 2006 and the Habs of 2026 is that the Habs, the Oilers run in 2006 was, I wouldn't say fluky, but it was a little bit unexpected. They had an old goalie, Dwight Rolison, who was fantastic. Whereas the Habs, like I just said, it's just the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe the finals, but you have to be careful. In 2018, the New York Jets, the Winnipeg Jets, had a very young team that reached the Final Four, and then I would say they were a good team. They won the President's Trophy in 2025, but they never went back. And they had a young team, with Kyle Connor and Mike Scheifele at the time, and Connor Hellebuck, and they never went back. So you never know with this, but I do think the Habs are trending more in the right direction than the wrong direction, and it's not a fluky run at all. Yes, Dobeš was good. They won 2 Game 7s, but you know what? They won those two Game 7 again. Very good teams. It's not like they're beating crap out there.
The hardest path to the finals.
It was the hardest.
Close.
So we'll see. We'll see. Now anything goes. I mean, it's a best of 5.
Yeah.
The Habs have home ice advantage. Colorado is on the verge of elimination. And look, you never know.
Crazy stuff, Snake. Crazy stuff. But I bring
even if they win the cup, they have to get that number 2 center.
Okay. I am 100% with you, and I'm glad we're having this discussion because it popped in my head, and honestly, I'm not worried. I think Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are smart enough to realistically assess this team and follow along with the plan and the process that they've put in motion since they came in. But I'm reminded of failed examples, Snake, like you bring up, and another one, even though they didn't make the conference finals, right? I'm still going to attack these guys. They seem to be my favorite prey. The Seattle Kraken, the year they beat the Colorado Avalanche to move on to the second round, everyone was like, oh my God, Seattle won. And then they were probably thinking like, oh my God, we won. We're better than we think we are.
Yeah, we're Vegas 2.0. We're Vegas 2.0. Yeah,
exactly. So they committed, Snake, to an older core. They signed all these weird contracts thinking, we're just a few players away. Like, we beat the Avalanche. Haven't made the playoffs since.
Yeah.
They've been terrible, Snake. So this is kind of like in the back of my head. I'm like, please don't make that same mistake and overcommit to
they didn't
this
have a young
current
core. They didn't have a young core when they beat Colorado.
No, exactly.
They didn't beat Colorado because of young players. But the thing is, Jakob Dobeš was fantastic. Would the Habs be where they are right now had he just been average? Not so sure. So, I think Habs management know that Dobeš was a big part of their success so far, and they have to improve on other aspects of the roster.
So now on to the improvements, Snake. We're obviously going to dissect this in depth this summer once the season is over. However, we want to remind everybody that this is not a finished product, right? You mentioned the second line center, but specifically, which aspects do you think the Habs are lacking in order to become a true contender for years to come?
What I've said all year, I think probably more tough guys. But when I say tough guys, I don't necessarily mean fighters, but more players like Josh Anderson is in the playoffs. Yeah. And I know they're hard to find, but a little bit more grit. Also on defense, I think they need another tough defenseman, like the one they used to have, like Brett Kulak or Ben Chirot or something like that. They need another guy like this.
Yeah.
Well, some guy like this. I think they don't have many holes, but I'm just saying as a whole, maybe less rely on the top line to score tons of goals like they did in the regular season, because, they had a 50-goal scorer. And so far that 50-goal scorer has only been good on the power play and in game 1 against Carolina. That's about it. So I think, the top 6 has to be better, and the bottom 6 is okay. Maybe just a little bit tougher, a little bit more the William Carrier type of player, let's say. Yeah. Same on defense. The rest, I think it's really getting there.
Of those aspects that you mentioned, how much can they get from what they have in-house already? And how much do they need to go get elsewhere?
It depends on your timeline. Obviously, you can think of a guy like Florian Jacki, who could be a fourth liner and be a tough, but he's young. He's young. Is he ready to make an impact? Because if you look at these strong bottom six players that good NHL teams have, they are on the older side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at, I just mentioned William Carrier. William Carrier is born in 1994, I think, or something.
He's 31.
He's 31. You see, he's 31. And Jordan Martinook and Jordan Stahl and all these guys, they're on the older side. And usually these guys, yes, you can get them in house, but they usually become that type of player on their second or third team later in their career. They are very hard to identify as junior players or even as young AHL players. It's very hard for me to look at an AHL roster right now, anywhere in the league, and say, oh, this is going to be a great fourth line player when he's 28. This is very, very hard. So those are guys that you have to get when they become available, because they do become available.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't cost an arm and a leg. I mean, San Jose only paid the 2 second-round picks, 1 or 2 second-round picks for Kiefer Sherwood. And Kiefer Sherwood is that type of player. So that's why it's I can't really say there is an in-house solution on that aspect of the roster. Regarding more talent, Michael Hage is coming, but Michael Hage is probably 2 or 3 years away from being an impact player. Going back to college, then he has his rookie season, and you can probably count on him maybe the year after. If we look at the Demidov pattern, I think Demidov's breakout season will be next year. So, especially if he gets better line mates, I mean, wow, it's going to be something. So, in-house, I would say Reinbacher, we don't know what it's going to be. And I don't know if the free agent market is a good place to find these guys. I think you have to take advantage of teams that are rebuilding and might be ready to let go of certain players that are still good, but they just don't fit the timeline.
Yeah.
The way Michael McCarron was traded by Nashville. It's not because
he's effective in Minnesota.
Yeah, he just didn't fit the timeline. So I think that's what you have to look at, because usually these good players don't become free agents. Good bottom six players do not become free agents unless they ask for astronomical sums of money. They don't become free agents. And like I say, it depends on the timeline. So you have to study like each roster one by one, and who's rebuilding, who's ready to sell. And because the sellers of yesterday are not going to be the sellers of today. I think San Jose is done selling. I think Chicago is done selling. Anaheim is done selling. Obviously, they won a round in the playoffs. So there's going to be a new trust the process type of teams. That are good. Vancouver.
The next wave of rebuilders.
Yeah, Vancouver. The next wave. Vancouver is one of them, obviously. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. You can maybe mention Calgary, but look, that's going to be another discussion for another day. Point is, Snake, I think the takeaway from what we just talked about, it's going to be a busy offseason. Expect some trades, potentially offer sheets. We'll leave it at that. Now, you mentioned the Western Conference Finals, and we have to talk about that one. What the hell, man? Vegas Golden Knights are leading 3-0 over the Colorado Avalanche. If someone had told you before the series, hey, one of the teams is going to be leading 3-0, wow, it's Colorado, of course.
Yeah. On my French podcast last week, I mentioned that you couldn't really discount Vegas, although I had Colorado all the way since the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
I mentioned you couldn't discount Vegas because they had been playing very well towards the end of the series against Anaheim. It was like they were getting into it, and the Knights are the Knights. They've been a great team over the first 8-9 seasons that they've been around. However, it is a major surprise that they be
3-0.
3-0, especially yesterday. I mean, a lot of people went to bed with Colorado leading 3-0, and it was like, okay. And there was one thing in that game. I mean, Colorado was leading 2-0. Then I think it's Dorofeyev who scored, and then the goal was refused because of high stick. Yeah, and then Colorado scores. Lots of teams would have been like, okay, it's over. At least we won 2 games on the road, and let's regroup and let's win the next game. No, they came back and they won. And I think with Colorado, there are 2 things I want to say about them. Yes, the Makar injury has not helped. That is for sure. But they're not a one-team player. But I think that they have been banking on the fact that okay goaltending you can make it with okay goaltending. They had Darcy Kemper 4 years ago won the cup. Now they had Wedgwood. Wedgwood is a career backup. Honestly, he had some good moments this year, but was it because of Colorado's defense and very powerful team in front of him? Most probably, because now we see what's happening. And one final point about Colorado, Jared Bednar. He's been around for 10 years, which is like, 900 years in human years in the NHL.
Yeah.
And when you look at his record, yes, he did win the cup, and that can buy you some time. But outside of that cup, they don't go very far in the playoffs. They didn't make it to another final. I think it was their first Final Four this year, outside of that cup-winning year in 10 years. I think Bednar's status has to be questioned if the Habs, get swept by Vegas.
That would be something.
Yeah,
that would be something. Look, it's crazy to think about because Vegas finished 13th in the NHL this season. They actually had the same amount of points as the Washington Capitals, who did not make the playoffs. So had Vegas been in the East, they wouldn't have been in the playoffs. Look, they're in it. They won the Pacific.
Yeah. And John Tortorella, man. John Tortorella.
I guess keep skipping press conferences. It's working. I don't know what to tell you.
If Vegas wins the cup, I have to tell you, this is the turning point the biggest turning point in the whole NHL season.
Oh yeah,
it's not going to be trades. It's not going to be anything else. But the firing of Cassidy and the hiring of Tortorella a few games before the end of the season, it's like they felt something. Now Tortorella, we'll see about it next year.
Yeah,
at this time. May 25th, 2027. Let's see what happens with Tortorella. But for this year, it's working. Look, he's like the 9th inning reliever in baseball,
Yeah. Wow.
That you bring in for 1 inning, but if you make the guy a starter, it doesn't mean that it's going to work. But this guy, the formula has been working, coincidence or not. I think he has to be given credit.
It's remarkable, and I mean Mitch Marner, the narrative that he wasn't playoff performer, leading the playoffs in points, probably the leading candidate for the Conn Smythe.
Yeah,
it's listen, the NHL is a ruthless league. I mean, think about Bruce Cassidy for a second. Okay, the poor guy can't even interview to get another job, and he's stuck watching his team get to the Stanley Cup Finals. Oh man, that's
I tell you, fans can be attached to players and become emotional sometimes, and that's okay. But it is such the opposite with NHL, management.
Yeah,
management is ruthless, like you say. Look, it's a dog eat dog. Professional sports it's a dog eat dog situation.
Exactly.
Whether it be individual sports or team sports, it's what have you done for me lately? And there's not much room for feelings, I have to say.
Unfortunate, but that's the reality of the situation.
And it's the same in junior hockey. So imagine the NHL.
Yeah. Well, listen, we'll talk a little bit about junior hockey, but first and foremost, a quick word from our partners, Cheapest T-shirts.
Stop overpaying. Buying t-shirts, hoodies, or blank apparel? Same brands, same products. Lower prices. No minimums. Buy one or 1,000, same price. Fast Canada shipping. Multiple warehouses. Stop overpaying. Visit cheapesttshirts.ca.
And we thank Cheapest T-Shirts for their partnership here at the Sick Podcast. Thank you to our friend Nick. Another shout out as well to Betway, where you can get a deposit matchup bonus up to $300 on your first deposit. You can scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the details section to create an account and redeem your welcome offer. The offer is only available for new customers. Terms and conditions apply. The offer is not available in Ontario. You must be 18 years or older. Please play responsibly. As I mentioned, we're going to talk junior hockey here. The Memorial Cup is well underway. The Kitchener Rangers beat the host Kelowna Rockets 5-0 in a physical match. That was a heated affair. Everett then beat Les Saguenayens de Chicoutimi 5-3. And Chicoutimi avenges their loss with a win against the hosts 3-2 in overtime. Those are the scores for now throughout the tournament. Snake, any takeaways? Which teams have impressed you or disappointed you?
I think no surprises yet. We had mentioned in our preview that Kelowna was not really of the same caliber as the other teams. You know, usually the host team is trying to put together the best team possible. And because the Memorial Cup is awarded about a year in advance. So, or sometimes 2 years in advance. It depends on the situation. So teams have time to prepare, but there's so much you can do at the trade deadline to load up your team for a Memorial Cup run. Rimouski did it last year, and they struggled this year. So now they're rebuilding. I don't know what's going to happen with Kelowna, although by luck, they had the number 1 pick in the WHL draft. So Kitchener was not the best team in the Ontario Hockey League, but they were pretty darn good. And you always have to respect the Ontario League because it is the best league of the three. So any team that comes out of that league will always be, it has to be considered like very strongly as, if not the favorite, very close to being the favorite to win the Memorial Cup year after year. Everett, I like Everett. I still think they're the best team of the four. Landon Dupont, playing great. He's 16 years old only. So in order, I had Everett, Kitchener, Chicoutimi, and Kelowna. So far, that's what it is. One of the two top teams, Everett and Kitchener, will play each other. One of them will lose the game. And so usually what happens, the pattern with these round robin tournaments is pretty much always the same. One team is 3-0. One team is 2-1. The other one is 1-2, and the last one is 0-3.
Yeah.
So Chicoutimi beat Kelowna yesterday, so they are pretty much guaranteed the tiebreaker. Not the semifinals yet, but the tiebreaker. If Kelowna loses their next game, Chicoutimi is going to be in the semifinals, which is very good. Then who knows who they're going to face? Will Everett beat Kitchener? The loser will probably face Chicoutimi. So far, I would say no surprises, no upsets, nothing special, but a good tournament, albeit in the middle of the Final Four of the Stanley Cup. But the game started at 9. So if after the Habs game, if people want to catch some action, it's pretty good. The final will be next Sunday at 7:00. And I think the Habs and the Canes would be playing Game 6 at that time.
Record it or watch it afterwards. But yeah, no, it's
I feel bad for
really high quality
I feel bad for Chicoutimi because they've been waiting for this, for 32 years.
Yeah. And
now, it just so happens that they win during a season where the Habs are going very far into the playoffs, which is rare. So, look, what can I say? But a good tournament so far. Next, on Thursday, we'll talk a little bit more because at that time we'll know the matchups. Talk about individual players that have been very good. A couple have probably raised their stock for the draft. One of them, I find Liam Lefebvre.
OT winner.
Yeah, who went undrafted last year, but he could be the Bryce Pickford of 2026.
Oh,
if you recall, Brad Pickford had been
he was passed.
He was, and he had a good Memorial Cup. Habs drafted him. Maybe Liam Lefebvre, 6'3" center. I mean, the guy was playing high school hockey last year in the States. Very hard to get noticed because the caliber is not that strong. But here in Chicoutimi, I mean, he started their year with Rimouski, was traded to Chicoutimi. Really like him, and hopefully he gets drafted this year.
Yeah, well, that's these great stories that come out of the Memorial Cup. It's always fun. And listen, if our viewers, aren't able to follow along the tournament, just tune in to this show, and we'll give you all the information you missed out on. But do recommend watching the hockey. It's very entertaining. It's very good stuff. I mean, the Kitchener Kelowna game, it had a bit of everything in there. Some rough stuff, some big hits, some big fights, a lot of goals. So yeah, it's great hockey. Highly recommend it. Snake, we're going to move along here, and I think it's time to go digging in the mailbag. Two great questions that were sent to us via the chat on our YouTube channel. The first one is coming from Mike. Snake has already said before that he prefers Demidov to McKenna. Personally, I think Demidov is slightly overrated and will peak at around 80 to 90 points. Great player, but not a franchise player. This is the reason why I believe the core of the Habs, while currently more mature, will be surpassed by the Ducks core when they get more mature, resting on the shoulders of a sturdy Carlson, Gauthier, Seneca, Lacombe core. What about Seneca versus McKenna? I know they're different kind of players, but which one do you believe is more valuable to a team? Which one is better to build a team around? Is McKenna good enough to become a cornerstone of a franchise?
Okay, I'm going to start by answering on a general basis. Three players are mainly mentioned here.
Yeah,
Seneca, Demidov, and McKenna. All three are wingers. I think none of them is a franchise player. None of them. But I do think that Demidov will be the best of the three. Yeah, okay. What if he gets 90 points? But will McKenna be good getting 120? I'm not so sure either. Seneca is McKenna and Seneca. I until proven wrong, and I know that Seneca now, he's a couple of years older, and he has like a big advantage over McKenna in the sense that he's been in the NHL. But I think I probably would still take a chance on McKenna before Seneca. Because Toronto is in such a crazy situation. They're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't.
Yeah.
And I was reading in The Athletic this morning. 6 scouts were surveyed by The Athletic, and they asked them, who would you pick first? And only 3 of them said Gavin McKenna, but all 6 of them said that Toronto was going to pick McKenna.
Yeah.
The argument was they kind of have no choice.
No.
I mean, exactly. it would be like, can you imagine if Gavin McKenna becomes a 100-point guy, and Stenberg, as good as he is a 72-point guy? And that's the risk you're taking by not taking McKenna. But the other scouts, it's kind of interesting. One of them had Stenberg at number 1. One of them had Malhotra at number 1. And there's another guy, believe it or not. He had either Chase Reed or Albert Smits at number 1. So that's why when I see, and I've mentioned this on the show a couple of weeks ago, when I see people going nuts when a public list, draft analyst, who has a public list, goes like against the narrative, imagine a guy, whether it be Scott Wheeler or Craig Button or whoever, Sam Cosentino, having Albert Smiths at number 1 right now. I mean, the guy would be a laughing stock. But there's an NHL scout right now who's hesitant between Reed and Smiths. I would never take Smith at number 1. But you know what? I get the reasoning. It's probably the type of player that this scout prefers. You know, a big defenseman, a big two-way defenseman who can be a cornerstone of your defense, who can play 25 minutes a game. Whereas he might see McKenna as a 5'11" forward who plays on the perimeter. Maybe. I mean, I'm just guessing why they would feel that way. So getting back to the question, I don't think Demidov is overrated. I think it depends on what you mean by overrated, Mike. Is it because fans see him as the next 25-point guy? They see him as the next Guy Lafleur? Or is it based on the fact that in his first season, he did get 90 points? I mean, he got 62 points. So it's like, oh, okay, he's overrated. Yeah, he's a rookie. Rookies rarely have an impact. Even Macklin Celebrini last year, he was good, but he was not what he is this year. Now, to the core of the Ducks. That's an interesting question. This is probably the most interesting point that Mike is making. Could the Carlson, Gauthier, Seneca, Lacombe become better than the Habs score? I think what happens with the Habs score is that we've mentioned it quite a few times on the show. There's like 2 generations. Suzuki Caulfield on one hand and Slavkovsky Demidov on the other hand, and Hudson. So if we want to compare, the Carlson, Becca, Seneca, whatever. Duck score doesn't have a 26-year-old player like Suzuki or a 25-year-old player like Caulfield. So it's a little bit hard to compare. Now, will that core have a bigger impact at some point than Demidov, Slavkovsky, let's say Hudson? I really don't know. I love both cores. I really don't know which one. I know that they're very big in Anaheim, but in a way, both teams can only meet in the finals. So it's not like the Habs are preventing the Ducks from reaching the finals or vice versa. So it doesn't really matter unless they meet in the finals. I think the difference between the Habs and the Ducks at some point, both teams that are going through great rebuilds, it will be obviously in net, and it will be the supporting cast. Exactly. Because I don't think that the 2 cores will be so different that one could be the difference over the other. However, if you look at Dobeš and Fowler, I much prefer that tandem to what Anaheim has.
Dostal and probably what the Italian guy, Damian Clara.
Yeah, and they don't have much coming up. Although goalies, you never know, but they don't have much coming up as much as the Habs do. So I think goaltending could be the difference. Pat Verbeek is very good at finding supporting players. I find, you got like guys like Ross Johnson and Ryan Poehling. Who had 15 goals this year.
Great success.
He's been good. He's been best hockey of his career. So I think that's going to be the difference between those two. I don't see, like I say, Suzuki and Caulfield are a bit older. So maybe at some point when Suzuki and Caulfield are like 32 and the Duck score is like 27, the Duck score could be better just because they're younger. But I do get the point. I mean, I love the score. They are big. They are so big.
It's 2 teams, Snake, that are going to be compared to one another for quite a few years now, because they kind of started rebuilding around the same time, right? They got high picks around the same time, and they both have very promising young players on the roster. Both very exciting teams to watch. So, listen, for us, I think we're just hoping to see some Stanley Cup Finals between those 2 teams, plural. That would be great entertainment, and also very good for the notion that, rebuilding does work if done properly. And those are two teams that I think are doing it properly.
Yeah, you want to see teams like that win the cup. Of course, you want to see teams like that win the cup. And one final point on the Ducks and the Habs. Well, right now the Habs are one series ahead of the Ducks. But the Ducks played a good series against Vegas, especially at the beginning. I really thought they had a chance. And then at some point, Vegas took off, in the cartoons when Wile E. Coyote is about to catch Roadrunner, but then he goes beep, beep, and he runs away. That's pretty much what Vegas did against Anaheim. Yeah.
Some questionable goaltending as well. Dostal he was really good actually for Czechia in the Olympics, but overall this season,
he was
average.
And at times he was bad. The week I was in Anaheim, he was horrible. 3 games in a row.
I had him on my fantasy team, so I'm well aware. He cost me a few points sometimes, but
just like Declan Celebrini.
Listen, I finished second. I won some money this year, so
good. You would have won with Celebrini, I guess.
I would have. The funny part is, I actually got offered Celebrini at the start of the season in a trade.
I know,
and I was about to do it. And then someone upstaged me and got him, and he ended up winning the league. So listen, I should have listened, Snake. I should have listened.
I remember that first or second episode we talked about.
Lessons have been learned. Okay, lessons have been learned. Snake, we have one more question in the queue, so let's pull that one up. And this one is coming from our good friend Rick Woods. Great podcast as always. Thank you, Rick. It's true we never stop learning, nor should we think we know it all. Man, the wisdom. I've been watching since 59, and I still can't figure out some things. Question. Can you explain the on and off switch for the Montreal Canadiens, particularly using the 2 games in this series on May 21st and 23rd? This isn't the first time this season that the youth experience system, they can't really seem to get it going consistently. It would be nice to see the Habs of May 21st play at least 2 games in a row this series. Rick, I agree.
Well, Rick, I've been watching since 1973, and I still can't figure things out. So I do agree with you.
The game.
Yeah, I don't know what you think, Shayne, but I think there are many answers to this question.
Yeah.
I would say, first of all, I think Carolina really went back to their style. Mm-hmm. And now it's for the Habs. Now that they've seen it on Saturday, they have to adapt that they're not facing Buffalo. Whereas on last Thursday, they were kind of facing Buffalo with Carolina. So I think that's one reason. I think the Habs have to adapt. Now, why can't the Habs do this 2 games in a row? Like I said, there's a plethora of answers, but I would say that even Stanley Cup winning teams are not going to be good 20 games in a row. But I do agree with you that it's hard. It's rare that the Habs will have like 2 great games in a row. Part of the reason, I think, is because the roster is still not where we want it to be. Mm-hmm. And there are some players, like, for instance, Kirby Dach. He started off on the wrong foot. Then he became very good. And now it's more like so-so, let's say. Yeah. Same with Bolduc. Same with... There are too many guys that are not necessarily... that cannot produce the same results game after game after game after game. Like I say, that's part of the explanation. I don't know what you think, Shayne, but that's my take on it.
I think there are many factors at play here. And if we're focusing specifically on these playoffs, Snake, we mentioned it. The Habs have the hardest path to the finals. They faced the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round, right? And it's not like they couldn't string 2 good games in a row. We take game 5 and game 6, for example, right? The Habs win game 5. They probably play their best game in game 6, and yet they lose. So sometimes I don't think the score reflects the performance, but it's a fact. I mean, they've only strung 2 wins in a row once, technically twice if you count game 7 of Buffalo, game 1 Carolina, but in one series, It only happened once. It's game 2 and 3 against Buffalo, right? But again, Buffalo's a really good team. Carolina's a really good team. So I think the strength of the opponent is also at play here, right? Other teams have time to game plan and adapt and learn from their previous loss. Meanwhile, the Habs, it's kind of like a back and forth type of thing. It's normal. I think in the playoffs, these situations are to be expected. But you know what? Sometimes I do notice that, they win and then they look considerably worse and then they look considerably better. They have yet to lose 2 games in a row. I think that's the point I like to focus in more. They have yet to lose 2 games in a row. That means they're resilient. They're able to adapt on the fly, bounce back very quickly, but also it would be great if they could string some wins together. I think that'll just come with experience, though.
But they're going to have to do it against Carolina.
Technically, they could go 7 and not win 2 games in a row.
Yeah, but I think with Carolina, I think I'm not saying they're must-win games, but they have to take advantage of the fact that they're at home for 2 games, because with a 3-1 lead, they would be they would have a cushion. If they go back to Carolina, then it's a best of 3 with 2 games in Carolina. And if Carolina plays the way they did on Saturday at home, it's going to be tough.
But for some reason, home ice advantage doesn't seem to be an advantage. And it's not just with the Habs. Like, it's throughout the playoffs. The road team has been at an advantage for some reason. And I know a lot has been said about the Bell Center, and there was even an article telling fans to, like, tone it down a little bit. I think that's insane. No. The best atmosphere in the league should not tone it down whatsoever. And I don't think it really affects the players. If anything, it maybe just makes them want it too much and they try to do too much. I think that's what Martin St. Louis said. Like, they want to give the fans such a good show that they do too much and maybe forget their style a little bit. But again, that's an experience. I don't really think long-term that's a concern for me. So great question, Rick. Unfortunately, I don't think anybody could actually answer that, but we can give some theories. That's as good as we could do.
Yeah.
Well, Snake, I think we've done it all. We've covered everything we had to today. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we jet out of here?
No, I think it's the games go on at the World Championships. We're going to talk about it on Thursday because finally the medal round starts. No more games, between bottom feeders. Memorial Cup, we'll know what's happening because the round robin tournament will be over. Mm-hmm. And 2 more Habs games and maybe Colorado out by Thursday. So plenty to talk about. I don't think there's going to be any other big news because teams don't tend to do anything during the Stanley Cup playoffs, especially at this time of year. But still lots of hockey to be played on the ice that we will comment on. And after the Memorial Cup, then it's going to be time for draft lists.
Oh, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I like for everything to be concluded. I like for the World Championships to be concluded. They end next Sunday. Memorial Cup next Sunday. Then I'm going to work on the final details of my top 20 that we'll share in June on the show.
There we go. So, folks, you know what to do. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. We upload every Monday and every Thursday. We're pretty consistent with that. We're going to go all the way up until after free agency. So you've got us until mid-July, and then, we're going to enjoy the summer a little bit. Not much happening. We're going to take a little break, and then we'll be back in September. But for now, it's crunch time, all right? We're getting down to the nitty-gritty of everything, and draft season's coming up, so this is the place to be. Hit like, leave us a comment, send in your questions, your topic recommendations for next show. We look through every comment to see if you guys have good questions, and you always do. So we thank you for that. For Simon, the Snake Boisvert, I'm producer Shayne. Thank you to producer Jimmy, back at Master Control. This has been another edition of the Sick Podcast. Trust the process. We're back Thursday. Take care, everybody.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, Trust the Process on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.